So, I don't know, Dick, are you having internet difficulty? Okay, well, maybe he is. All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Plymouth Select Board, Tuesday, March 14th.
Recording in progress.
Harry, do you want to read the statement? You have to unmute yourself.
I'm aware of that. That's what I was doing. So I gave you a thumbs up.
All right.
In accordance with state law 2475 and pursuant to chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, this meeting will be conducted via remote means. Betty, do I read the in person? Because the preamble is okay, because it's not being in person.
Oh, gotcha.
Totally virtual.
Yeah. You can read it. You can just.
Okay, hold on a second. Well, I don't have the new agenda. All right,
I have the new agenda that was posted on the town's website. In accordance with S2457 and pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, this meeting will be conducted via remote means. Members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so in the following manner. Tune into PAC TV government cable access channels, Comcast channel 15 or Verizon channel 47, and watch the meeting as it airs. It is aired live, or watch the meeting on the PAC TV website at pactv.org. Members of the public who wish to participate in the meeting may do so in the following manner. Go to the town website under the select board page. There is the agenda for tonight's meeting. Click on the Zoom webinar link and it will take you to be able to participate in the meeting remotely. And in addition, members of the public, and this is just in general moving forward, if you would like to make a public comment during the public comment period, please raise your hand by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen.
Great. I think we just got Anthony a new task. He's got a new job now. Okay. So public hearing is Fraggle Incorporated doing business as Sandy's at Plymouth Beach, 132 Warren Ave. Tara Frere, manager, is requesting the following licenses in conjunction with their request for transfer of an annual all alcohol license. The common victualers license and early Sunday sales, 10 a.m. Is there anyone that would like to speak on this? Okay. Is there anyone opposed to this?
Madam Chair, we actually have a person's hand raised by the name of Thomas Rook.
Okay. Is it regarding this?
I'm not entirely sure. His hand is raised.
Mr. Rook?
Mr. Rook, you may unmute yourself. Mr. Rook, you are able to unmute yourself by at the bottom of your screen. There is a unmute button on the left-hand corner of it.
Can you now hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, so my name's Attorney Tom Rook. I live 4 houses away from Sandy's beach bar, if you want to call it that. And we have 2 grandchildren, and we go down there 3 or 4 times a week, and we love it. It's a beautiful family location where you can have hot fudge sundaes, hot dogs, hamburgers, French fries, and as I said, hot fudge sundaes. And our grandchildren love it. And it's a beautiful spot. It's family oriented. And I would strongly encourage this board to approve the transfer of the license. I think it's a great opportunity for the community. It's a wonderful, in my opinion, It's a wonderful opportunity for the residents of Plymouth to enjoy the beach and at the same time have some great seafood. And if you have grandchildren or children, enjoy their food as well.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone opposed?
Madam Chair, we also have Everett Malaguti, who has his hand raised. Everett, you may unmute yourself.
Thank you, Anthony. Everett Malaguti, Chair of the Natural Resources and Coastal Beaches Committee. I entered in as there was chatter before the meeting started. I thought I heard Ms. Cavaco say that 2 parts of that license are being removed for tonight for a future meeting.
Yes.
And those were the entertainment ones, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you so much. I will actually speak on those during the future meeting for that, as the committee did have a couple questions to ask on those. So once that comes before, I'll be back in attendance for that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Malaguti. All right, back to the board. Do we have any questions? Mr. Brandisi, did you?
The chair, I just, to Mr. Malaguti's comments, we're more than happy to sit with them in advance of the meeting so that we're prepared to answer his questions wholly the next time this issue comes up.
Great. Would you like to do that, Mr. Malaguti?
I just made him an attendee again, so
Okay.
we can, the town manager and I can reconnect. Yeah.
We'll reach out to him.
Okay. So now bring it back to the board. Any discussion? All those in favor, and we'll do roll call. Mr. Bletzer,
Yes.
Mr. Helm,
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney, and Mr. Quinto,
Yes.
and myself, yes, it's unanimous. On to the next public hearing, aquaculture license for Jennifer Tarantino. I believe Mr. Hunter is on our panel, and so is Ms. Tarantino.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, good, how are you?
Good. Thank you for the opportunity. My husband and I are very excited to have the chance to diversify both our growing operations as well as our working operations. So this will allow us to better manage the tide and just try to farm in different ways from a different area.
Great. Mr. Hunter.
Good evening to the select board. Yeah, and this is very similar to a few other requests that you guys have heard in the last month or two. So Jennifer is looking to give up her site within the aquaculture development zone and start a new site over in the Saquosh area, and we do support that.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this? Anyone in favor or opposition? No. Back to the board. Any questions for the board? Or to the board, or with the board?
I'll move approval.
Second.
Approval by Mr. Mahoney, seconded by Mr. Bletzer. It'll be a roll call vote. Is there any discussion? A roll call vote with Mr. Bletzer,
Yes.
Mr. Helm,
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney,
Yes.
and Mr. Quintal,
Yes.
and myself, yes, unanimous. Thank you.
Thank
Congratulations.
you. Thank you. Have a nice night.
You too. Public comment. Is there anyone for public comment?
As a reminder for any members of the public who are on Zoom with us tonight, you may click the raised hand icon at the bottom of your screen. It looks like we have one person that would like to speak, Pat Edelman, and I will give her the ability to able to speak. Pat, you may unmute yourself.
Thank you for letting me speak. I just have a comment about the forum last night, which I considered a political forum because it's about a question on the ballot. And I heard town staff member after town staff member say how difficult it would be to accommodate the committee of precinct chairs or town meeting members. And I took offense to that as a town meeting member. I just am disappointed that town staff is taking a political stand in an election matter. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment?
Madam Chair, we have Rick Veo, and I'm going to bring him into the room here. Rick, you'll have to confirm on your screen. Okay. Rick, you may unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So Rick Veo, I wasn't sure if the public comment section, this would be the only public comment section. I was actually going to comment on the outdoor dining vote and ARPA funds coming up later, but I wasn't sure based on the agenda, the way it was written, if there'd be an opportunity to speak on that or if I should be speaking during public comment.
We can, it's really either way you'd like. If you want to wait, we usually move those administrative notes in a group. So you can probably, it would be okay for you to say, Mr. Helm, hold on.
Madam Chair, it is not an administrative note. These two aspects of this are agenda items.
Hold on.
They're after the admin notes, right after.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Mr. Veo, if you wouldn't mind waiting.
Sure, no problem.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Next, anybody else for public comment?
If anybody would like to speak during public comment, please click the raise hand icon at the top of your screen. Oh, looks like we just had somebody. Oh, they keep Irene Caldwell. Can promote her to a. Oh, there you go. Okay. One moment. Irene, you are able to unmute yourself at the bottom left-hand corner of your screen.
Hello. My name is Irene Caldwell, and I'm here today to state my growing concern about the public's ability to reach our ponds and beaches. And as you go through tonight's meeting to talk about parking fines and parking areas, I would request strongly of the town that you consider the rights of the public to reach the beaches as you close places where we can no longer access. To that concern, I've gone and spoken to a whole lot of people, but I don't have numbers, but I'll do whatever you want, that we would like to have a bus that would meet us at the Sims house or at Manamet Elementary that would get us down to the public access place on Whitehorse Beach. I understand that you're working to protect the landowners. I understand you're working to protect the environment. I just think that the public has a right to get to Whitehorse Beach on their own without waiting for a special invitation. And if we had public places where we had the Gatra bus or something, picking people up, we would be considered a welcoming community. I don't know what would happen with this, but certainly this summer, on the 6 busiest days of the summer, where we know that Morton Park is going to reach capacity or probably will reach capacity, and Whitehorse Beach is going to reach capacity, if you could enact using the traffic engineer as a person to help you, that we have a trial run. I've tried to get to all the committees, but I have not been invited to one. Tried to get to Tidal Beaches. I've pleaded with them to please let me come. And the only meeting they had was on the one day I said I couldn't be there. And that was the only meeting that they had. I went to Open Space Committee. And on the day I was at Open Space Committee, they chose not to acquire property that was adjacent to Great South Pond. That would have been a lovely property for walkers and hikers that go to Pinnacle Hill to sit and have a picnic by the beach. But the public access was not considered. It wasn't the domain of that committee. Anyway, what do I do so you would consider this request of public transportation to take people to Morton Park on the hot sunny days of summer, when we know that because of your changes in parking policies is going to mean that lots of people can't get to the beach?
Thank you. Just for a point of information, the Gatra buses do go to all those areas. I know they go by the public entrance about every 30 minutes down on Whitehorse Beach. So there is public transportation.
Thank you for that. Would that be true for Morton Park too?
I'm not sure, but I'm sure we can have staff check that out.
And Hedges Pond also?
Again, I believe they do go down to Hedges Pond. I'm
I
not
know
sure about.
that the Nauset Light Beach, they allow the school allows the parkers to park at the school, and it's either free or for $1 you can get down to the Nauset Beach. If we could do something like that to get to Morton Park, Fresh Pond, Hedge Pond, and Whitehorse Beach, that would be a wonderful, we could call it the beach run. Could run every hour or two. You don't have to stay there for the whole day. We wouldn't have anybody walking on anybody's yards. I know that the limiting factor for all the beaches is how many porta potties are we going to put in, and how many lifeguards are we going to pay for? So that's the limiting factor. Making the minds of the adjacent abutters and landowners feel relaxed enough to let the public use our beaches would be wonderful. Betty, how do I follow up on this?
Hold on a second, Mr. Helm.
Irene, in terms of using the schools as parking areas for people to then access the beach, as part of the Whitehorse Beach parking discussions, the school board, school district, whoever, was approached and asked if they would allow that, and they said no.
I understood that they did say no, so I took that to be the final word until I heard that Nauset Beach has the free bus or the $1 a bus, and it allows the public to park on the school property. So if it works for Nauset Beach, it seems like it should be across the board.
That isn't under our purview. So that is strictly with the school department. And I do know that we have public transportation, and I believe that Mr. Brandisi would like to speak.
I just wanted to add that I know Mr. Everett Malaguti is he's convening next Thursday the Natural Resources and Beaches Committee. At these meetings that they've been having, they've been discussing many of these issues, in particular the issues surrounding Morton Park. And I think it would be great if Ms. Caldwell attended one of those meetings where she could have her concerns vetted out in more detail.
Thank you. Can I, will that be posted on the town meeting site so I can, the last time they posted, I was already on a plane.
Yes, Irene, I will send you the agenda and it'll be on the town's website as it normally is 48 hours, business hours before the meeting occurs.
Yes.
But I will follow up with you, Irene, after the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I look forward to working, because I know we all love the town. And I know you all work so hard because you love the town. So I look forward to seeing how we solve this wonderful problem. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment?
Madam Chair, we have Rich Cirque.
Okay.
Richard, you may unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
All right. Thank you for recognizing me. I want to talk briefly about the subject of graffiti.
Okay. Did we lose Mr. Cirque?
Just give us 1 second. Let's see. Give me 1 moment. We might have lost him for a second. Just 1 moment, please. Rich, I apologize for that. Not sure what happened there.
Whoops. Probably my fault. Anyway, I wanted to briefly talk about the subject of graffiti. Like most of us, I'm troubled by the amount of graffiti we see everywhere, especially on signs, jersey barriers, and utility boxes. I forwarded to you a copy of the graffiti and litter bylaw that was passed by the town in 2010. I was involved at that time as a member of the COPC in drafting the bylaw. Unfortunately, I don't believe that the protocols set forth in the bylaw have been utilized frequently. Graffiti on public property is particularly bothersome because its existence suggests that the town is powerless to stop it or is indifferent to it. And I was thinking about whether a fund could be created from private donations that could be used to reward high school students who remove graffiti from public property by paying them to do so and by giving them public recognition. I sent to you a copy of the bylaw and a copy of a sign at the northern end of the bike trail. And I called it Before. It's a picture of what the sign looks like with all its markings. And I got a product that I got from Home Depot, and you can apply it with a clean cloth, and it wipes the graffiti away, almost as if it was an Etch-a-Sketch screen. That's a picture before, and there's an after picture as well. This is the type of project that a service club or a scout troop might be interested in sponsoring, but such sponsorship isn't necessary. I just wanted to get your thoughts on it. I'm going to be speaking at the Committee of Precinct Chairs meeting on Thursday, and I'm also going to be speaking before the school committee next Monday. But it just seemed to me to be a way of removing a common scourge and fostering citizenship, and especially among young people. And a place to start could be signs of the type that I sent to you. So I'll stop speaking now and see whether you have some ideas that could advance this notion.
Well, I don't think, I just received it. I know Mr. Brandisi may have something to say, so if we can certainly take a look at it and come up with a plan internally and, be able to communicate that. Mr. Brandisi?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Cirque, for raising this. I think many of you all have heard under my town manager reports, I've often talked about graffiti and vandalism, both around town and to our public property. So this issue certainly is a priority of my own. I believe Mr. Quinto, a couple of months back, had asked the administration to appoint a graffiti task force to look at this very issue. We've had those conversations internally. We can certainly work with Mr. Cirque to come up with some other strategies and creative ways to try to remedy this issue. But I think we all can agree that graffiti does not go unnoticed. And to Mr. Cirque, to your question, we do all take it seriously, and I don't think any of us are indifferent on this issue.
Mr.
Thank you.
Blitzer?
I believe that the DPW department is now handling a portion of it, and they get funding through the PGDC, correct, Charlie? We
Yeah.
were funding that for years.
I was raising my hand about, yeah, when I was on that board, I don't know if it was 6, 8 years ago, I'm not sure, it was a while ago, and they started the graffiti task force. And I know we donated $5,000, and we did it, I believe, more than once. We funded it. So my question is, 2 questions. Do we still have that task force? And are there any funds left in that task force or committee?
That was actually handled through redevelopment authority. That gentleman's retired.
You can look into it, because I know we put funds in there. They may have used, they might have exhausted the funds because this problem is so rampant. I mean, it's.
But I know if the town requested a DPW, I know that, I'm pretty sure that PGDC would help out again, right?
And while I'm commenting on this issue, I've been known to be doing the graffiti. I'm not knocking the youth, but it's probably getting them involved will be a good thing, because they'll be aware, of this problem. So I like your idea.
Thank you.
Well, honestly, that it wouldn't even be something, I mean, we could have a conversation with the school department, because I know the Honor Society are always looking for community service hours, so that would be something we could certainly entertain.
Eagle Scouts as well. Eagle Scouts are always looking for projects, so.
I think that's all good ideas, but I also think that, we have to talk about it, because it's going to be different levels of cleaning. Some,
Right.
like Richard says, you put the gunk on the rag and you wipe it off, but there's also some highly ones that involve pressure washing or whatever.
Right.
So,
Also,
I-
Mr. Brady. Oh, sorry, Richard. I was
Yeah.
gonna, I'll let you. Is the union, I'm sure that there could be issues with the unions. I'm not sure about that.
I know that signs are probably the easiest things to deal with. When it comes to masonry and so forth, then you're dealing with power washing and so forth. But I thought we could at least start with signs. The process in the bylaw. Oh, by the way, I met with Lee Hartman, and he indicated that he has a sum, something like $5,000, which may be the sum of money that Charlie was referring to. And he also has a limited supply of graffiti remover spray of the type that I took a picture of, but it's in limited quantities. But the process in the bud, just so everyone is clear, a person has to notify the Office of Community Development by sending them a picture and an indication of where the item is located. And then upon receipt of notification of the existence of graffiti, the Office of Community Development is authorized to forward it to the DPW to remove the graffiti. But I just thought that process is fine, but there's so many things that the DPW staff has to do. It seemed to me that a citizen effort here, especially among the youth, where we use a reward system to incentivize them would result in citizen participation and perhaps few people who wanted to tag signs, because as we all know, the secret, I think, in fighting graffiti is to remove it promptly, so that a person who tags a sign doesn't walk away with the impression that that's going to stay on there for 6 months or a year. It's got to be removed quickly.
Mr. Brandisi, let's get this on the agenda as a docket item. And we could maybe look into the information that Mr. Cirque provided and get some more detail on how to move forward.
That's great.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cirque.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Public comment?
As another reminder, please click on the raised hand icon at the bottom of your screen if you'd like to make a public comment.
Okay, as we move forward, we have several licenses and administrative notes. Do any of the board members have any questions or comments on any of them? I look for a motion to move as a group.
Move them.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Mahoney, seconded by Mr. Blitzer. Discussion? All those in favor? Roll call vote.
Yes.
Mr.
Betty,
Mahoney.
that was, I made the motion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Unless
Mr.
John did too. Did John make one?
No, I was,
Oh, okay, all right.
Sorry, I was looking at my sheet. I didn't know who, I thought it was Mr. Mahoney. Roll call vote. All those in favor? Mr.
yes,
Mahoney,
yes,
Mr. Blitzer,
Yes.
Mr. Helm,
Yes.
and Mr. Quintel.
Yes.
Myself, yes, unanimous. As we move on, proposed outdoor dining fee schedule, and I believe that's Mr. Brothers.
There we go. All right, so we're looking for the board to approve a new rate fee. And we're looking for a change in the current existing $1,000 fee to the business owners. And we're looking to go to $2,000 for renewal businesses and $2,500 for a business that's a new to the outdoor dining and then requires a new parklet. So this follow-up to that will be the next item, which is the ARPA request. But just so the board's background is, in previous years, the ARPA was the funding source that covered the balance between what the business owners paid in and what was required to create the parklets. So the majority of them are pretty much covered for supply material, and that's why you see the $500 difference requested. But if there's any other follow-up questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Okay.
Madam
Are there
Chair.
any questions? Oh, Mr. Quintel.
Brad, is there any other projects waiting for approval with ARPA money, and how much ARPA money is? Anything left?
There is money left. Derek, chime in if I'm wrong. I think we have about 3 million left, 3 to 4 million that's unallocated technically, but we do have a list of items that actually is over 5 million. So we're doing a little bit of homework on our end to kind of figure out what we want to go for a final proposal to you guys, but I believe that's in the range of the numbers we're looking at.
Thank you.
Mr. Helm.
Yeah, I would like to ask that we remove consideration of these two to the March 28th meeting. Neither the Downtown Merchants Association or the Outdoor Dining Committee are aware of any of these changes or suggestions. And I feel that it would be best practice to present to them and then vote on them here.
So Harry, there was an email sent out from Chris Badeau. I think it was either late 2 weeks ago or early last week that outlined all of this. So I don't know what group it went to, but there was something that went out to, I believe, at a minimum, the current business owners who used the parklets last year.
No, that's great. But I still maintain that it should go through it should be run through, not, it does, we can do what we want to do, but I think it's only fair to run it by the outdoor dining committee and the merchants, the downtown merchants. They're part of this proposal is the the removal of the flowers of the town, putting in the flowers and allowing the merchants to put in whatever kind of flowers they want. That's highly problematic in terms of one of the great things that this board did in initializing the outdoor dining committee was we created an outdoor dining scenario that was good enough to be covered in the Boston papers in contrast to what was going on in the North End. I think we'd like to maintain that, but that whole aspect of it, in my mind, should be discussed with both of those groups, the outdoor dining because of their experience, the downtown merchants because of their being downtown. So anyway, I am asking that we do that, but I see that Rick Bayo's hand is raised.
I'll second that. I'll second Harry's motion for discussion, Madam Chair.
Was there a motion or was it just a comment?
I was considering his comment a motion.
It is a motion.
Okay. And just hold on a second. Discussion? Mr. Mahoney?
Oh, I'm sorry, John, go ahead. Sure, should be.
I completely agree with Harry. I think I just heard Brad mention that Mr. Badeau a while ago might have sent out an email. I think we have to be more robust than that with respect to reaching out to all the downtown merchants. We have to be in the same room talking to these people. And how did we make the jump from 1,000 to 2,000? What was the validation there? And then, of course, the second piece is how does the ARPA fund come into the whole thing? But we've got to be as open, as transparent as possible on this issue. And I just want to make sure that nobody is, they're down there on Main Street, not understanding what we're doing here or what is on the table currently.
So just to add on one comment to that, John, is that
yes,
in the sheet, in the file folder for you guys for the agendas, there should have been a sheet in there that outlines all of the costs. And last year, the cost is for a new parklet, when you include the flowering and watering, is just under $5,900 for the town. And then a renewal was just under $4,900. So the town was absorbing $4,800 per new business and $3,800 for every new, I shouldn't say every new, for every existing business. So that's what the ARPA money covered last year. ARPA's drying up. So the question becomes, as we go through, and if we talk about this next meeting, long-term, we got to figure out what the solution is for the money piece of it.
Yeah. How does it become sustainable long-term? Yes.
And I can understand the sustainability question about it, but I know that Mr. Veo would like to speak on the subject. So if the board doesn't mind, I will allow Mr. Veo to speak. I'm sorry, excuse me.
Thank you. And while I don't disagree with anything that Mr. Helm said in terms of, I think you do, need input from the committee and the downtown business owners. Mr. Badeau's email was very robust and detailed everything and the costs and how it was going to work and the fact that ARPA funds were drying up and that, the town really doesn't have a lot of choice but to increase the cost. So I think it was very detailed. When that letter went out, and I received that as well, I talked to the town manager, and we've had a couple of discussions about how do we work around this. I mean, my feeling is that the selectmen, the DPW, the outdoor dining committee did a phenomenal job last year and transformed outdoor dining in Plymouth and made it something that we actually were bringing people to Plymouth for. And as Mr. Helm pointed out, it was recognized, you know, both in Boston papers and other resources. I think at this point, I guess my biggest fear is that we slide backwards. Obviously, the business owners are not going to want to spend more money, but I think they have to. And I'll be one of those business owners next year fighting that, because we have some, you know, shops opening up and whatnot that we're going to be looking to do that. And I understand the dynamics of it, but I think the fees have to go up. There's no choice in that. I think we have an opportunity this year and this year alone. And what I'm here tonight to ask for is that the board consider increasing the ARPA funds by $10,000 to cover the cost of the plantings, and then push back on the business owners to cover watering and deadheading, as they did deadhead flowers last year and kept them tidied up, so to speak. But the town was handling watering, and watering is a major expense. Well, I think partly because it's on overtime. So if the board would see fit to look at increasing the opera funds by $10,000, I think it's a stopgap for this year. Then we can reconvene as a committee, along with the town manager and the DPW, and hopefully come up with some creative ways of addressing it for next year, with a long-term goal of obviously having permanent outdoor dining. But I think it's very important that we do not slide backwards. I think the consistency of the flowers, the consistency of the color of the flowers were one of the big draws. Although I think the barricades looked nice, the flowers were a major draw, and I don't think that is a good idea to leave on individual shop owners. So to Mr. Helm's point of putting this off, while I don't agree with the concept, I think we are under a little bit of a time constraint here. I think April 1 has typically been the start date of this. I think it might be pushed back. I'm not entirely sure. But nonetheless, I think we do need to roll forward on this. And if the board, you know, would approve those additional funds, I think the shop owners or restaurateurs have had a chance to give some feedback to Mr. Bedeau and the town manager. I don't know if the town manager would, you know, weigh in on that at all, of what feedback. I did not personally hear, anecdotally, a lot of pushback in the increased fee. Although no one likes it, I think they recognize the reality of it.
I would agree with that. Our office did not get any feedback from anyone that we reached out to.
Mr. Blitzer.
Is the outdoor dining task force, one of the reasons why we put that task force together, Harry Helm was in charge of it, was for consistency on our outdoor dining. That was one of the things. We wanted consistency. And that means if we allow each restaurant to do their own flowers, different colors, it's gonna go back to what it was when it first started, the first year. It's not gonna look good. It's not gonna have the appearance that I think we want for a downtown. The other thing, after listening to Mr. Vail, who is a stakeholder, he's got a big stakeholder in the downtown. He also has the ear of other stakeholders. And also, I don't anybody in the public comment here, the stakeholder businesses town, I don't hear any of them talking against this increase. Nobody wants to pay, okay, let's face it, but it's a reality. But I think if we can up the ARPA money to pay for the flowers, I think it's a good idea, because I want to keep that consistency downtown. And to go off to raise the fees, we've been doing outdoor dining now for a few years, and the fee hasn't been raised. So, and again, one more time, there's nobody really here in opposition of it. So I would be in favor of it. The last thing is I would be in favor of voting on it tonight, because April 1st is the start of the outdoor dining. And right now, certainly you look out the window, it doesn't look like we're going to have too much outdoor dining April 1st, but you never know. The weather could change, and that could change. So I would be in favor but I want to hear one more time from the town, from Brad. Can we afford, or from Derek, can we afford to the 10,000 for the ARPA money?
Yeah, we
So
can
just-
definitely, we can definitely add on the 10,000 to make it the 3,500 request.
So
35,000.
before we get into any more conversations, and I see you, Mr. Holm, hold on just a second. We have kind of combined two agenda items
Right,
with this.
Okay.
So the first one is whether we are going to vote on the fees. There's a vote anticipated on the fees. And the second one is the ARPA funds and whether we're going to add an additional $10,000 to it. So I think that the board has to decide, first of all, if we're going to vote on those fees this evening. Mr. Helm, I don't know if your opinion has changed, whether you want to move forward or however, you can unmute yourself. Like,
Yeah, but I wanted to wait until you were done. I would like to ask Mr. Brindisi, is there a problem if we hold off for 2 weeks and actually hold face-to-face meetings with the people who are most affected by this?
well, I mean, I think we certainly can meet. So Monday morning, the Business Association will be meeting here at Town Hall. I had met with Lee Hartman this morning, and we had already talked about meeting with the association, letting them know about the fee increases and giving them a roadmap of how what they need to do next year for themselves. Like, for example, go seek VSB funding to help subsidize the flowers. So that's in motion. But I think to your question, Mr. Helm, what we hadn't done is gone back to the committee, the outdoor dining committee, and had this properly vetted either. Our next meeting is March 28th. Outdoor dining is supposed to begin April 1st. We definitely would be up against the window, but I think honestly, I think we can do it. I think it's the proper way to go. I think it makes sense to make sure that all of our stakeholders are on board before we move forward in any fashion.
Quintel.
I would just like to know next week what the plan is going forward with this. I brought this up the first year it was implemented, then Harry took it over. I brought it up that year, and I'm going to bring it up again in 2 weeks. When do the people realize that this was implemented for COVID relief? We had a pandemic. That's how this all started with the governor. It was a certain date, and it was to end. We meeting the community, the town has increased it. It's expensive. It looks good, but you know what? If you want to look good, you got to pay for it. And I guess my question is, when the ARPA money's gone, who's going to do the paying? Because I don't think the taxpayers in this community are going to be up for that, knowing what we're going to be facing in the next year. So I just want, I hate to be the bad news guy, but I'd like my questions answered. I mean,
Agreed.
ARPA and the governor's date, I believe, was whenever it was, that's the end. There is no pandemic. So we're subsidizing businesses that want to expand outside. And now I'm hearing go to the VSB for money. I sit on the VSB. And, it's going to be a hard sell there too. If things turn a little bit, which I believe they're going to, we have enough events, and it's supposed to really be heads in beds. Parklets are not heads in beds. So, I mean, not saying to be the bad news guy, but at some point, we got to stand up and say, where's the money coming from? If it costs $50,000, where's the money coming from? That's all I have for next 2 weeks. Thank you.
So one of the things that Mr. Brindisi, I know you're probably not aware of is that a couple of years ago, Mr. Quintel and I had reached out to the sheriff's department and had an agreement that we would purchase all of our flowers for everything that we do from them. And they also went as far to say that they would save an entire greenhouse just for the town of Plymouth. Now, I don't believe that that was followed through on, but I know where we're buying flowers, and I know the prices that the sheriff department charges are quite different. So if someone could, you know, at least moving forward now, we may not have everything, they may not have everything we need, but I think someone should reach out to them and find out where we are with prices and all that kind of stuff, because it was a significant savings when Mr. Quintal and I went through it, and I don't think it was ever followed through.
So
Mr.
that's a great suggestion, and I think this is a suggestion for the committee. I don't think it's appropriate for town staff to organize the colors of flowers for businesses. I mean, I think the businesses, I mean, they know how to run a business, and for town staff to have to get involved in organizing this type of event, I think is overreaching, to be honest with you. This is what the committee is for. And I think we could go back to the committee. We could present the costs associated with the town supporting this. And if the committee decides that, you know, that they want a certain color flower and from a certain vendor, then I think it would be great for them to go ahead and do that work. I mean, honestly, town staff, and we talked about this last night, is stretched, and we keep adding more and more to their plate. And to have them start to organize, you know, this outdoor dining, I think is an overreach for town government. We're the licensing authority. You know, we shouldn't have to determine what color flowers that they're going to be putting out there. If the committee wants to decide what color flowers, that'll be in the license agreement. We'll put that in the license agreement, and it's up to them to adhere to it, like anything else that we do when we issue a license or a permit.
Actually, this was even before outdoor dining. So it was more, we understand how much we spend in flowers, Brewster Garden. I mean, everything is beautiful, but where we're so budget conscious, we have to be able to, you know, get what's best, the best price for the town as we move forward. And like I said, the sheriff's department has agreed to wholesale things, and I think in that aspect, we need follow-up.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's a great idea. You know, all the flowers that our Parks Department uses on an annual basis, I'm happy to ask Nick Fiella to reach out and see if there's cost savings for our taxpayers so that they don't have to overpay for the flowers that we use in our different parks. I'm happy to do that. My point was, for us to organize flowers for restaurants, I think is an overreach to government.
No, I agree.
Thank you.
So, okay. So we're going to move the fee schedule vote to the 28th, and we'll have all the answers that Mr. Quintal's looking for and any others. But I believe that there is, or I'd like to make a motion to add the $10,000, as Mr. Veo suggested, to the ARPA funds for outdoor dining for this year, for the flowers and whatever else they need. Mr. Mahoney.
So, Madam Chair, there's a motion and a second on the floor. Are you like making a motion to amend what we're currently discussing? Just
Yes,
point of order.
we're amending, we're saying that the vote for the fee schedule is being moved to the 28th,
Correct.
correct?
Yeah, we haven't voted on that yet. No.
Okay. Do you want to withdraw your vote, Mr. Helm, or amend your motion?
I still stand by my motion to move the discussion of the proposed outdoor dining fee schedule to March 28th.
Okay. And it was seconded by you, Mr. Mahoney, correct?
Correct. We could take a vote on that and then address the subsequent motion. Okay.
Can I finish?
I'm sorry. My apologies.
I know I'm a little raspy in the voice, but So we have a motion and a second to move it to the 28th. Discussion? Roll call vote. Mr. Helm,
Yes.
Mr. Bledsoe,
Yes,
Mr. Mahoney,
Yes.
and Mr. Quintel,
Yes.
and myself, yes, it's unanimous. So now the second motion is to use 10,000 additional dollars of ARPA funds as presented by Mr. Veo. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
And it was my motion, seconded by Mr. Bletzer. Discussion. Mr. Helm. And
I
then Mr.
agree.
Mahoney.
Okay, I agree with this idea. And the reason I agree with it is that we do have to act expeditiously. And but at some point, and Mr. Quintel refers to it, in this coming year, after this April 1st goes into place, we are going to have to discuss how is this viable moving forward, and if we even want to continue doing this, and how do we make it viable moving forward. In the meantime, Mr. Veo is very correct that with ARPA funds, we will still, for this last year, have control over the flowers that are placed. And he is correct. One of the exemplary aspects of our outdoor dining was how amazing it looked, and how consistent it looked, and how it really, for those residents of Plymouth and visitors that it mattered to, it looked great. And I think it's important to continue that, but then in the next year, figure out how do we make this whole thing viable if we even move forward with it.
Okay. Mr. Bledsoe.
Harry, I absolutely agree with what you just said. I couldn't have said it better. So, and Dickie, I know you feel the same way. But we'll have to look at this for next year and see. And everybody has to prepare that, that eventually we're not going to be able to fund it through ARPA. So anyway, thanks.
All right. So, yes.
Yeah, exactly. It's not that I'm against it at all in any way. It's just that I don't think the night that it's scheduled for fees and how it's going to roll out should be continued because we don't have the plan. This stuff should be done before it's an agenda item. And, and I'm not saying somebody didn't get it or somebody didn't get it, but I think number one, the first thing we got to figure out, or that the committee has to figure out, is how they're going to fund it and get it to us or get it to a board in ample time to get it figured out, because there isn't going to be any ARPA money. So, I mean, I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Not that I'm against it, but you got to face reality. There's other things to look at. The rate we charge at the VSB, maybe we look at that. It's been a long time since we looked at that, and that home rule petition, and maybe it needs to be changed a little bit. Then there'd be some more money for different things, and but something's got to be done other than ARPA funds. That's all. So thank you.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. We have a vote. All those in favor, roll call vote. Mr. Helm,
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney,
Yes.
Mr. Bletzer,
Yes.
and Mr. Quintel,
Yes.
and myself, yes, it's unanimous. So that gives an extra $10,000 in ARPA funds for the flowers and everything. Okay, thank you. All right, the next order of business is we have an MSBA statement of interest for Hedge in Cold Spring. And I believe Mr. Campbell is here,
Yes, thank
although
you.
I can't see him. Oh, there he is.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much. It's great to join you, and thank you for this opportunity to speak before you. As Chair Kavako said, I'm here to seek the board's authorization to submit to the Mass School Building Authority a statement of interest form for both Hedge and Cold Spring Elementary Schools. But before I seek that, I'd like to first sort of set the stage, if I could, by sharing my screen and sort of talking about the work that led up to this request coming before you. So if you give me one moment. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
All right,
Yes.
Thank you. So beginning in July of 22 this year, the school requested the services of AI3 architects to assess the existing conditions of our 8 elementary schools specifically. So this study aimed to collect information that would support the submission of a statement of interest to the MSBA. So we had already gathered demographic and population trends through our redistricting exercises, as well as procured a physical building assessment in July of 21 through Bureau Veritas. So AI3's focus was to analyze our 8 elementary schools from an educational delivery perspective, which MSBA is also concerned about, including programs that are included, the distribution, and the size of our schools. So the goal of their work was to provide us with information required to inform a clear and concise statement of interest for submission to MSBA, if determined appropriate to do so through that process. So taking into consideration the physical building assessment that was previously done, as well as the educational assessment, which they focused on. So there are 2 components of an educational facility assessment, the first being the physical assessment. Again, reviewing the integrity of our building sites. Again, in July of 21, we had that work done, really to break down exactly what our buildings would need for the foreseeable future to help us with any capital requests or capital projects, or even smaller projects that we would need to prioritize for the foreseeable future. And as I've said since assuming my role as superintendent, we have many facility improvement needs, particularly at the elementary level. While we're very fortunate to have 2 beautiful high schools, our 8 elementary schools are older, as you know. 4 of our newer schools are approaching 50 years old, while 2 are 70 years old and 2 are over 100 years old. So in addition, not all of our schools are strategically placed, as you know, across town. Some of the buildings are a mile to 1.5 miles apart. But we recognize that, not all of our facility improvements needs can be met through capital. So we've tried to utilize ESSER funds as well for many of those needs when possible, trying to be very strategic about that. And speaking of grants, if I may, just briefly, I just want to quickly share a wonderful grant opportunity that we've collaborated with the town through Renew America's School Grant Program. So our facilities department has been working on a concept paper with Tiffany Park and Mark Reel. It's been great to collaborate with them to pursue funding through the Renew America School Grant for significant energy efficiency and climate resiliency upgrades to Plymouth South Elementary School, which needs a lot of work. Specifically, this grant would seek us $14.7 million in grant funds to undertake a very ambitious upgrade to that particular property, including a geothermal heating system, cooling system, installing a new roof upgrades, solar, replacing the building envelope, windows, you name it. So we'll be discussing that actually this Thursday with the town a little bit further. So just to give you a sense of this, because it's an exciting project, which I just wanted to share with you. This chart shows you the quarterly estimate energy consumption and cost at South Elementary, and this project would make us, energy neutral at this property. So not only would it be a good, savings of thousands upon thousands of dollars every year, but it would also bring a possibility of a shelter in the south part of town, which could be utilized for South Plymouth as well as the Upper Cape. So, we've been moved on to the encourage phase, which requires additional work. We'll be working with the town, as I said, but there is some cost share pieces here, but the potential to bring over $14.7 million for that property. And again, the savings is just significant. This is just a list of those construction possibilities that would be included in that. As I mentioned, the windows, the window replacements, complete ADA upgrades, solar, mechanical systems. It's a very exciting project, and it's been great to work with Tiffany and Mark along with the facilities department. But I want to get back to why I'm here. The existing condition study that we did. So, the success of school structures, from a learning perspective was evaluated by AI3. Here are some of the assessments they look at. 8 of the elementary schools were analyzed for the educational equity and the opportunities through the lens of the heightened design patterns noted on this slide. So when looking at buildings for 21st century learning, a critical element of an education program is whether the learning spaces are appropriate for 21st century learning. As you may have heard me say before, when we were going through our redistricting exercise, we have some significant concerns about some of our spaces, particularly at our older elementary school, Hedge Elementary School. While the population is just over 200, the physical layout is very challenging for the demographics and the supports that we need to provide our students there. So each space has a recommended size as AI3 evaluates that. They take into consideration MSBA standards. So a space too small would be overcrowded. A space too large would require more maintenance than necessary. So they evaluate it for the 21st century learning environments when determining what would be feasible in the terms of MSBA standards. So over the years, out of necessity, speaking of Cold Spring and Hedge, as well as other buildings, we've had to repurpose, reinvent, reconfigure, expand, and divide our schools in very creative ways as programs came in, as classrooms were set up. And despite our best efforts in some of our schools, particularly, they, trying to offer a modern elementary school within the confines of our existing conditions in certain buildings, such as Cold Spring and Hedge, are very, very challenging, as was noted through this assessment by AI3. So just to sort of summarize their executive summary for the public and for you, you can see this. The most significant educational facility challenge facing the Plymouth public school system is the severe overcrowded and lack of an appropriate 21st century elementary school environment for 2 of the facilities, Cold Spring Elementary and Hedge Elementary. The lack of appropriately sized classrooms and educational support spaces combined with aged buildings, systems, and components creates a very challenging environment that is grossly inefficient when compared to numerous districts in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So, and there you can see some of the educational deficiencies and the physical building deficiencies that were noted in that report from AI3. So both Cold Spring Elementary School and Hedge Elementary School were identified through this process to consider replacement. These existing schools, as I said, do not meet 21st century educational standards, and the physical constraints of the existing buildings are an impediment to maximizing the educational possibilities for the students in those buildings. So as part of the space deficiency analysis, they also reviewed the properties associated with their 8 elementary schools. And they, in addition, 5 other parcels in the town were reviewed by AI3. They looked at site constraints, and some of them they're listed here on the slide for you to see. They were generally utilizing aerial information available from MassGIS. There's no site work or surveying conducted at this point through AI3. It was an exercise intended only to begin identifying the buildable area on each of the parcels. These diagrams that are in that report that was shared with you were intended to assist the district in determining if a construction project is viable for the existing schools and whether an addition, renovation, or new construction would be appropriate on the site in the town, either on the school property or someplace else. So what was determined is that Cold Spring would be a viable build for a new school, but both buildings were recommended for new construction. So this evening, I am requesting that the select board, prior to the SOI submission closing date, which is in April, authorize me as superintendent to submit to the Mass School Building Authority the statement of interest form for both Hedge and Cold Spring Elementary Schools. While we have no intention of seeking 2 elementary schools in the north part of town for North Plymouth, we would seek 1 ultimately. We have consulted with the MSBA, and a statement of interest would need to be submitted for both schools. And they would determine that through the process if we were elected to enter that phase. So I'm happy at this time to answer any questions that you may have.
Does the board have any questions? Mr. Mahoney?
Chris, thanks for coming in tonight. Do you have a copy of the report or the study that Day I3 did? Is that something that we
Yes,
can?
it was sent to share with you last week.
Okay, I don't remember seeing. I don't
sent
remember
it.
seeing. Anthony, you sent that?
I
Okay,
did.
all right, I'll, great. How long was the report? I'm looking forward to reading that.
It's it's about 100 slides, plus or minus a few pages, but it's not dense, Mr. Mahoney.
Okay, and how many other options did it look at? Did it incorporate like West Elementary into this, or was it just strictly the Cold Spring and Hedge?
They really focused on Cold Spring and Hedge, but they looked at all the properties. They looked at all the properties, all the 8 elementary schools. But in terms of, looking at our existing condition study, which we, the facilities assessment that we did in July of 21, looking at the age of the buildings, the constraints of those, they felt that those were the most viable to pursue with the MSBA at this point.
Okay. Back to, I didn't see the South Elementary conversation coming in here tonight. So that was very interesting. You guys are chasing what, Department of Energy, a $14 million grant?
The Department of Energy grant, yes.
All right, so overall, a $20 to $22 million project down there at South Elementary. And is South still the most populous elementary school in this community?
It is. It's over 600 students, about 620 to be precise.
And it's safe to say that the location still works and it's still worked for decades, correct?
Yes, the location, certainly I would not recommend, yes, the location does work, Mr. Mahoney, for that school. Where we find, we have Indian Brook is another location, which is sort of closer to the Manomet side, but is close to Manomet Elementary School. We have 25 acres of land at Indian Brook, down the road. If there was ever an expansion project needed for South Plymouth, that would be a viable space as well. I know prior to me coming here 15 years ago, I believe when they were looking at the high school projects, I believe that was a potential site for a high school when they were looking at whether or not they wanted to build 1, 2, or 3 high schools in the town of Plymouth. So there is land there, buildable land, expandable land, but South Elementary is large enough, certainly. I don't think we'd want a bigger facility, but that project, that grant would be very exciting for the town of Plymouth and certainly for the school department. An HVAC system, as you know, is $5 million alone for that site.
So when you look at the list on the South Elementary project, you're talking about HVAC, geothermal, I saw windows, and I saw a roof. So if you invest that $20 to $22 million in South, does that get you a life extension of at least 20 years?
Oh, I would think so. I would hope so, yes.
Oh, okay, so there'll be no modernization needed in that school for 20 to 30 years, God willing.
Yeah, there may be some basic maintenance to like flooring or things of that nature, but significant costs. I think that's a very exciting project that would really extend the life of that building for the foreseeable future.
And also provide you with that 21st century educational atmosphere.
Yes, the space there is certainly better than the Hedge in Cold Spring, and it would provide us that, yes.
Okay, and where would the $7 million, the community match, where would that come from?
That is yet to be determined. That is something that we would need to have some conversations about, and how much, over time, how many years are we looking at and where that money would come from.
Okay, so I look forward to hearing the rest of my colleagues on the board talk about this one, but obviously long overdue, and I'll support any vote needed to move the process forward on the Hedge and Cold Spring initiative. There's no time frame on that yet, correct?
Correct. There's no commitment by doing this. It's just allowing us to get into before the MSBA to be considered. But we have to submit by mid-April the statement of interest with all of the necessary information that MSBA would need to be considered.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any other questions from board members? I'd look for a motion for both Hedge and Cold Spring.
Madam Chair, the schools would like to request that the motions
Separately.
be separate. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, and there's specific, I'm sorry if I may, that there's specific language that needs to, within the motion, which was included, which is very specific, that the MSBA would require. School committee voted on this, I believe, 2 meetings ago, and read the both motions verbatim as well.
They are in the agenda packet.
Okay. Someone like to make the first motion for Hedge Elementary
Move approval on Hedge.
as stated in the agenda?
Correct. Yes, Madam Chair.
Do we have a second? I'll second that motion. Discussion?
Sorry, Betty, I was trying to second that. I was muted.
That's okay. Is there any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, roll call vote. Mr. Helm? Yes. Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mr. Blitzer?
Yes.
And Mr. Quintel?
Yes.
And myself, yes, unanimous.
Thank
Okay,
you
the
very
next
much.
vote. The next vote is for Cold Spring Elementary. Same, not the same language, but
Move.
seeking a motion?
I move approval that we approve the language that's provided in our packets with respect to Cold Spring Elementary.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Mahoney, seconded by Mr. Helm. Discussion. Okay, roll call vote. Mr. Helm,
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney,
Yes.
Mr. Blitzer,
Yes.
and Mr. Quintel,
Yes.
and myself, yes. Unanimous on that as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate your time and your support.
No problem. Okay, next is the public hearing for the beach sticker parking area fines. And I don't know, is it Derek?
I'll take this
or
one.
Brad?
Yep.
Yep.
I'll take this one. So as you guys know, back in the fall town meeting, the home rule petition was approved and then it was sent to the state legislature. State legislature approved it on January 4th of 2023. In the home rule petition, it gave the town the ability to charge $150 up to 21 days for a parking ticket. $150 for up to 21 days. Between 22 and 42, the fee was $200. And if the fee was not paid after the 42nd day, we're able to adjust it to $250. So what we're requesting for you guys this year, in terms of parking districts, is not to that full extent, because if you remember, a lot of the public comment and perception at town meeting was that that was too high. So we felt it will meet somewhere in the middle. So what we're requesting from you tonight is to approve the parking fine of $100 if paid within 21 days, $125 if paid between day 22 and 42. And on day 42, the citation gets sent to the registrar, and that would require $150 after that 42nd day. And we worked on this with the police chief as well, the town manager's office and the police chief, and we felt this was a fair compromise for this parking year.
In Park Plymouth too.
Correct.
Charlie got his
Okay.
hand up.
All right.
Betty, Charlie,
Charlie,
you're muted.
Charlie, you're muted.
Okay, how's that?
That's better.
Okay, sorry. Anyway, I just want to clarify on that 150, is the most it'll be. The $100 is the ticket. $25 penalty. And just so folks know that 25, once it back at the registry, that's a fee to the registry. So the town's not getting that fee, just so everybody knows this. Okay, that fee, we have, once that's marked, we have to pay the registry that money to the town. So I believe, Brad, that's how it works, right?
Correct. Yep.
Okay, I just want everybody to know this. Thank you.
Okay, we did receive a letter from one of the parking committee members from Whitehorse Beach. And it says, Dear Chairman Kavako and Select Board members, I am unable to zoom in tonight at the parking hearing beach sticker program area fines. As a member of the parking committee and fully support the rate increase for parking here in the Whitehorse Beach District over the last 2 years, unfortunately, the $50 fines are insufficient and needs to be increased. I would like to thank you in support of the home rule petition sent to the legislator to help in this matter. Alice Baker. So, is there any further discussion amongst the board? Mr. Helm?
Just a question. Is Alice did not mention a specific amount of the increase. Was the proposed the town manager's office proposed increase that was run by the police department at all, was that run by the Manomet Village Steering Committee? Because I believe that's the letterhead that this comes in under, and also the parking committee. Was the actual amount run by it?
So I could say we were not in contact directly with the Manomet Steering Committee. In terms
And
of
it wasn't from the steering committee. It was her as part of the parking committee.
I believe, but I believe that in her signature, it mentions the Manomet Village Steering Committee.
It does not.
Okay. What is it? It mentions the parking committee?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes.
And the only direct contact we had was with Park Plymouth. I'm not aware of us having any other outreach.
Betty,
Well, I
Everett-
think, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Betty, Everett has his hand up after, I don't know if you see that.
Okay, Mr. Malaguti. And then
Thank
Ms.
you.
Bostic.
Thank you. Ever Malaguti, Chair of the Natural Resources and Coastal Beaches Committee. This afternoon, we had a meeting to discuss this topic, and the committee voted unanimously to support the fee schedule as stated tonight. The committee did have a little hesitation in the beginning, but based upon what we were looking at for people avoiding the actual rules and regulations for the area by just parking and saying, oh, we can just divvy up the amount with the friends and people that are within the car to reduce the cost. This is a prudent approach that the committee thought would help to act as a deterrent, stating that if you do this, you're going to get slapped with a $100 fine, and the fine could still be used as to divvy up. I think people are going to think more about trying to divvy up with a larger amount than if it was just a pittance amount like it was before. So I just wanted to reinstate the committee did fully support this proposal as brought before the board tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Malaguti. Any other comments?
Madam Chair, we had first Christine Bostek, that's a member of the public, and then Irene Caldwell as a member of the public. And I think I saw Charlie, Mr. Bletzer's hand as well.
Okay, Charlie, do you want me to take them
No,
first, or do you?
Want to say before they comment, just because this may be helpful, is that this is not a money grab by either the town or the PGDC. First of all, the PGDC does not make money off of this. The money that be the administrative fee for processing tickets. And this is, we're raising this to stop people from infringing on people's private properties. Okay, that's been a problem, and that's why we're doing this. If everybody parks legal, there's no fines. Nobody has to pay anything. Okay, so it's not, we're not trying to tax law-abiding citizens of Plymouth. We're not trying to do that. So, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bostic. You have to unmute. Oh, there you go.
Okay, I just did. Good evening, everybody. My name is Christine Bostic and I live on Taylor Ave. I have been many times the victim of illegal parking where people pull into your car, into your yard. They slam the door shut and they run to the beach. You try to find out who they are and they just disappear somewhere. I believe in this $100 fine. I think it might waken people up a little bit. I am also the president of the Sands of Whitehorse Beach Association, and that has been a strong proponent of raising the fees for the parking. If there's anything else that the Sands of Whitehorse Beach can do to help the community, we will do that. That's about all. And oh, yes, I'd like to second what Alice Baker did state also. Thank you.
Thank you. And now Ms. Caldwell.
Ms. Caldwell, you will have to unmute yourself.
Yeah. Okay. I understand Christine's problem with living on Taylor Avenue. The problem is if the public doesn't have a legal place to park and we don't provide any way for them to get to the beach, it becomes a private beach, and it's not a private beach. It's a town of Plymouth beach. Just like Great South Pond was a Plymouth beach. Sorry. I don't know what to do. Isn't this about normal? Anyway, if we don't have planning about what to do with the people, then all of these beaches become private beaches because the public doesn't have a way to get down there. And I would have liked to have discussed, I would have liked to have had the public represented at any of these meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Excuse me, may I say one more thing, please? I
Sure.
don't know where their hand is. I think it disappeared. The one thing I'd like to explain to Ms. Caldwell is a lot of Whitehorse Beach is land court property. The town doesn't own the entire part. And the people that live on Priscilla Beach, that's also private. And people assume that all of that, including Priscilla Beach, is town property when it is not. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam
Okay,
Chair. Oh,
yes.
My apologies. We have Ginny Davis as well who would like to
Oh.
speak.
Yes.
Yes, I just want to respond to Ms. Caldwell's remarks about the public being part of it. And this was in several select board meetings. I know there were long discussions about this. And even in town meeting, when the home rule petition came up, there was a lot of discussion. And I just think we have to think of both sides, both the public and the private, and we all need to have respect for each other. So I think the town's really done their homework here. And it's never perfect, but it's a good start. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Okay. Back to the board. Is there a motion?
Oh, I will make the motion to approve the fee structure as stated.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Blitzer, seconded by Mr. Mahoney. Discussion? All those in favor, roll call vote. Mr. Helm,
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney,
Yes.
Mr. Blitzer,
Yes.
Mr. Quintel. You have to unmute, Mr. Quintel.
Sorry, yes.
And myself, yes, it's unanimous. Thank you. Just so PAC TV knows that Comcast is completely blacked out and I'm getting messages that they can't see what's going on if you're a Comcast viewer and it's in and out. So I know there was issues last night as well. Mr. Helm.
I've heard, if you've heard Comcast, I've also heard Verizon.
Okay.
So it would seem that our entire feed to the PAC TV channel is down for both Comcast and Verizon.
Okay. Well, there are 60-mile-an-hour winds, so I guess that has something to do with it. All right, the next order of business is Community Preservation Committee presentation for Hedges Pond, the Fisherman's Shanty, and the Comfort Station.
One moment, please.
And this is no longer than 10 minutes.
Looks like there's two. Oh, there we go.
There's two Miss Bill Cohans.
Looks like the one is the one Bill Cohan. There's another one in the as an attendee. Assuming it's another phone or some kind. Bill, can you unmute yourself?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Sorry about that. I'm having a little technical difficulty. My power's been going on and off. And the PowerPoint that we had, I am on another computer because the other computer is not reliable right now. But the Community Preservation Committee tonight is responding to a request by the town manager to speak to the Board of Selectmen about the fisherman shanties, these various buildings. So we're here to answer those questions. The best I can provide the committee at this point is that the Community Preservation Committee has met and has discussed the buildings at Hedges Pond. We understand, and there was also a site visit to this location to talk about the future of the infrastructure there. It has been determined by the town that there's safety related issues. They're moving ahead to take down some of these buildings. The Community Preservation Committee has offered to do a structural survey of the infrastructure at Hedges Pond. That structural survey would give the community insight into their current conditions. That could be then given to an independent cost estimator to determine what it would be to stabilize these resources, to give us the opportunity to talk at greater length of where we want to go with Hedges Pond, really Hedges Pond Phase 2, where after 10 years of running a park and a day camp program, what do we want to see? What improvements do we want to make at Hedges Pond? I know that the Community Preservation is eager for that discussion to happen, and we're willing to work with any board or committee that wants to facilitate that discussion. But for the time being, the committee has voted to set aside these monies. I have been trying to, and I did have a conversation briefly with the town manager in passing yesterday about access to Hedges Pond so that we could get the structural engineer in to do an assessment of the situation. And I've been given some direction on how to pursue that, and which we will. That is where we are with Hedges Pond. When it comes to the fishermen shanties, this is something that the Community Preservation Committee has been aware of for a number of years. We have been at different times in contact with different family members that actually held the lease on the property for nearly 70 years. The town of Plymouth had a lease for 70 years. The town owns the land that the fishermen's shanties sit on. The buildings themselves were there nearly over 70 years ago and have remained on that site during that period of time. The families that had secured the leases were fishermen who used these buildings for those activities. As the fishermen, were no longer using these buildings actually started to be cared for by the Department of Public Works. During the 1990s, the Department of Public Works and some of its employees would go to the fishermen shanties and keep them in order. But then as time passed in the early 2000s, it was clear that there was no one taking care of the fishermen shanties. The families were no longer using the buildings. There wasn't any attention given to the buildings, and there was a sign put on the buildings for their removal and demolish. That caused quite a bit of community outcry to find a solution to saving the fishermen shanties. And that's how the CPC came in contact with these family members looking for an opportunity to discuss possible saving of those buildings. The CPC took an application. With an application, the buildings became eligible for funding for emergency stabilization, which we did work towards boarding the buildings up and securing them. But we did reach an impasse with the town at that time, and the applications never moved forward. All we could do is take care of the buildings as they stood. Over the years, there's been some attempts to keep the doors and windows secured. In the spring of 2000, there was one of the buildings was burnt down. The CPC used its admin money to bring people in to determine what they could do as a result of this fire. There were, of the material that was remaining, there was a survey done of that material so we could at least document the building that had been on that site before we had the material taken away. What has remained on that site is a footprint for its pre-existing non-conforming use to determine what would be next to happen at that site. But that was nearly 3 years ago now. And the committee still is interested in pursuing a preservation plan for these buildings. We feel that they're incredibly important to our community. Their visual, they're a vista. It's as you drive through this part of Plymouth, they're associated with this location. They're a part of our history. They've been determined. There has been historical surveys and assessments of the buildings. They have been identified as a historical resource. We're very interested in working with the town to see what we could do to continue to stabilize these buildings. But over the years, the CPC has gone in with its administrative funds, and they have done significant stabilization work to this little white building that remains. The building out back was utilized as a cooling, refrigerated condition, and that does not remain in the condition that is likely to continue in that location. But we are very concerned with the remaining fisherman shanty, the white little building on the main road. The committee did meet and discuss this recently and voted to continue with a historical structural survey on the building to determine what its current condition is and what it might cost to stabilize the building. That's where we are with the fisherman shanty. And finally, at Stevens Field, it was determined by the town that the little building that is located at Stevens Field, built around the 1920s during the tricentennial, positioned somewhere around Memorial Hall for the people that were visiting Plymouth 100 years ago, was eventually in the 1920s moved to Stevens Field, and at different times used as a comfort station, used by the school department in the athletic program at the time when it was a high school football field. The little building has a long history, but in 1979, it became a storage building when they built a comfort station and a concession stand at Stevens Field. It is the determination of the town that that building has to come down. The Stevens Field Planning and Design Committee met and concurred. The Historical Commission took up the matter under the demolition delay bylaw. They determined that they looked at the historical documentation relevant to the building and determined that there was not going to be a delay. The building is going to be taken down. So that's pretty much, we had offered to do a assessment on the greatest concern the town had for that little building, and that was the original plan presented to town meeting called for the building to be repurposed as a storage building on site. The town felt as if that might be cost prohibitive. We offered to revisit those estimates that we presented to town meeting, but it has been the determination to move forward. And I think the priority with many people is to see that the Stevensfield planning and design, the Stevensfield project go out to bid as soon as possible. I think after waiting for now 9 years for this to go out to bid, I think we're all eager to see it go to bid. And I think that's what the final conclusion at that location. Our attention now has been solely turned to the fishermen shanties and the infrastructure at Hedges Pond. And we're looking forward to working with the town to do what we can to stabilize these resources. But the Community Preservation Committee recognizes that
Next 20 minutes, 25.
the Community Preservation Committee does recognize that these buildings are owned by the town, and the town has obviously has the right to take the buildings down, and that's the CPC is not going to challenge that. That's kind of a reality that we all recognize, that this infrastructure is owned by the town and controlled by the town and maintained by the town. We as a committee are reaching out to the town and offering to work with them to at least collect information so that when we do make a decision what to do with this infrastructure, that it's based on compiling this information. So we're standing by to determine what the town wants to do and how we can help them.
Okay, well, one of the things about the Stevens Field project, Bill, and I was pretty upset when I heard about this, that the CPC, there was a person on the CPC committee that made a motion to remove funding for Stevens Field. And I don't even understand why there was any type of motion made saying that the CPC can't overrule town meeting. Town meeting has already funded it and supported it. So do you want to explain what's going on with that?
The TPC did meet and did talk about the building at Stevens Field. And as I indicated before, when the Community Preservation Committee took an application to fund the renovations at Stevens Field, it specifically had a cost estimates done. The cost estimates were in association with repurposing the small wooden building that dates back to the 1920s as a storage building. We obtained cost estimates. We presented them to your board. We presented them to the Finance Committee, 18 precincts, and eventually town meeting voted on the plan for Stevens Field. The plan that we recommended to town meeting, the Community Preservation Committee, called for the preservation of this building. And the town is now determining to take the building down. And it will not be part of the plan that we presented to the Select Board, the Finance Committee, 18 caucuses, and eventually town meeting. All those committees and boards voted on a plan that clearly showed that the little building would have been preserved, would have been repurposed, and this money that we were setting aside was based on the cost estimates of repurposing the building. Now that the town has determined that the building will not be saved, the committee felt that, well, the CPC funds that are meant for preservation, not for demolition of this magnitude, based on what we presented to town meeting, that we would indicate that that CPA monies for Stevens Field that were meant for preservation in building a park would not include putting this building in a dumpster. So that's what the committee discussed, and that's the vote they took, that they would recommend that the money that was earmarked for this purpose of preserving the building, as we all understood it, is now not going to happen. The building is going to be thrown away. We don't want to see CPA money utilized to tear down a historical building and put it in a dumpster. If it is the wish of the town, and this is what they need to do, we will, seek the higher priority, and that is getting the Stevens Field bid out in the construction begun.
Mr. Blitzer. And then Mr. Mahoney. Gotta unmute yourself, Charlie.
A lot there, so that I want to say. In a historic storage shed, they had a problem with tearing down a historic storage shed. I find that I had to believe at Stevens Fields. So we got to stop spending money on buildings that we have no use for. Okay, and I don't even want to talk about it. We're very sensitive about the Symes house. I don't want to talk about that. I want to start with Hedges because I'm very familiar with. I did the tour, and I went there, and I agree with the town about taking down those 4 cabins. I toured it and I asked the questions. Do we need them? The answer was no. Recreation doesn't need them. There was a couple of cabins that they preserved that they need, and they're using them. They don't need those other 4 cabins. And those 4 cabins, they're actually dangerous. There's a lot that the kids go in there and do things, and they're actually a liability for the town. So I agree that they should be removed. The building, the other building, I would never put, I don't know. The problem I have with the questions I have in the other building is who's going to pay to maintain that building? Once, if we do spend money on it, I don't know whether it's 100,000 or $1 million, whatever you have to do to refurbish or tear down and build a new building. Who's going to? We don't have anybody leasing it. There's no revenue coming in to that building. And so who's going to pay to maintain that building? We don't have a great history of buying buildings and taking care of them. That's my question on that. As far as, do you have an answer? Do we have anybody that will be leasing that building if we do something with it? At Hedges? Bill?
Excuse me? The leasing of the building.
We talked about, because I listened to you, want to refurbish the building, either rebuild, tear it down and rebuild a new building. And my question is, I know we need a pavilion there, but if you build this other building, how are we going to pay for it? What kind of, is there going to be enough revenue coming in to pay for that building?
Okay, I understand. I think we have to understand when the Community Preservation Committee makes a recommendation to town meeting and town meeting votes to do something, the committee is sensitive to what we explained to town meeting and what our intentions were. And in this site, Hedges Pond, there is infrastructure. Now, some of the infrastructure has been modified and used. There are parts of Hedges Pond that we have utilized CPA funds to improve infrastructure at the park to support the day camp. Now, we see a purpose of revisiting the infrastructure, Charlie. Just simply, let's revisit the infrastructure. Let's stabilize it so that we can talk to the community about what are the next steps at Hedges Pond, the remaining infrastructure. How can we utilize it for phase 2, which would be beneficial to the community? I can't answer these future questions that you pose. I can only address what we proposed to town meeting initially, what we're hoping to open up as a dialogue with the town to do compile enough information so that we can have this discussion. But in the end, if you want to take these things down, you can. We don't have jurisdiction in stopping you from taking it down. We just feel that there is a connection between the committee its original recommendation to town meeting to take CPA funds and buy this infrastructure. Now that the town is determined to tear the infrastructure down and demolish it, we're just bringing to the attention that we're willing to have these conversations to collect the information so we can make decisions based on facts.
Okay, so the cabins, I don't see any purpose for them. They don't need them. And I don't see anything historic about them. We did save a couple of those cabins. So so there is still some history on the site, but the cabins have been positioned closer to the water so they can be utilized. So, it's a beautiful site that my first time there, I was kind of embarrassed that I hadn't been there before, but it's a beautiful beach area. So, but that's my feeling on that. I want to get to the fisherman shanty because I know I don't want to take up too much time. I've been in Plymouth since 1963, my family, and I've driven by those shanties for 60 years. What is the purpose of trying to refurbish those buildings? Because what I see there is I see these buildings with no parking in dangerous part of that road. There's no pedestrian crossing. Who's going to maintain it? I mean, I get all these questions on the fisherman shanty. It's again, we're going to be buying buildings that we don't need, and it's going to be a waste of, I believe, a waste of taxpayer money. So I'm against this. Doing something with those shanties. I think they should be just taken down. That's my opinion, because I don't see what the purpose of them refurbishing them. They're 70 years old. I know. I don't think that's that old.
They actually date previous to 70 years ago. A clarification. The little fisherman shanties were originally out on Plymouth Beach around the vicinity of where Sandy's is now. They were moved off the beach after a series of storms in the late 18th and 19th century came through the area. They altered the area. So the little fisherman shanties were picked up probably at least 70, 80 years ago and moved to this location. They date from the 1890s and the 1880s, these little buildings. These buildings are quite old. They've been associated with this location for over a century. They are our character as a community. When you drive by them, they tell a story about what Plymouth might have been like back 150 years ago at this location. They are significant historical resources in our community. And other towns, Charlie, throughout Cape Cod and the islands will take their fisherman shanties and they fix them up. And people look at them like, there they are over there, the fixed up little fisherman shanties. Sometimes they might not have a purpose other than the little building being fixed up and being kind of an added element to the experience of visiting Plymouth Beach and our waterfront. It is something to look at. But we're realistic in its future care. At one time when we did talk to some of the descendants of the original inhabitants of the fisherman shanties, they came up with this application, the Friends of Fishermen, the Fisherman Shanties, with the idea of stabilizing the little fisherman shanties and using them for storage and charging a fee, and that fee would be reinvested in the fisherman shanty. So the application that we originally intended did have ideas about how these little buildings could generate a revenue to take care of themselves. But I think it's important to note that these buildings have something significant to offer Plymouth, and that is our character as a community on Cape Cod Bay.
Bill, they're in Warren Ave in a flood zone, okay? Every time there's a storm, in fact, if you get on there right now, they're probably under right now, those buildings. So I believe that they're worthless to us, especially where they are. Okay, it's every storm they're going to get destroyed. This is taxpayer money that we're spending, that you spend, and we got to stop. We got to start picking and choosing what we're trying to preserve. And I'm all for, you've done a lot of great things, but saving those huts and saving these huts in Warren Ave, I don't think a good use of our money, the taxpayers' money. I don't know how.
Yeah, and when you think about the money, the Community Preservation Act monies are meant for historical preservation, and we have to start looking at these smaller details of our community that give it character, historical character. People come to visit Plymouth to see these amenities. We're losing our smokestack. We're losing a lot of architectural features around town. It is the job of the Community Preservation Committee to make recommendations at town meeting where we find opportunities of saving these characteristics of our community. Some of them might be small, some of them could be as big as the spire. So nothing gets overlooked in terms of its importance. It might be small, it might be big, but we are designed to look at preservation opportunities. And Charlie, all we're suggesting is that we stabilize these resources so we can do the analysis to see what the possibilities are.
Okay, I don't want to spend any money on, because I'd be against spending any money on those buildings where they are. It's a flood zone. It's already probably gone right now. It's probably underwater as we speak. So it's not a good use of money. So I'd like to hear from some of the board members. Maybe I'm on the maybe I'm not on the right page here, but that's so we gotta stop spending money.
Mr. Mahoney.
All right, Derek. So we have a committee that recommends articles to town meeting. They go to the legislative body. They're approved. And then after that, does the committee have the unilateral ability to cancel an article without returning to town meeting?
No, they
Okay.
cannot do that.
All right. So Mr. Quintal will remember this. I was a town meeting member in 05 or 06 when town meeting stood up and told the town manager at the time that we could divest ourselves of the Russell Street Police Station, the water barn on Long Pond Road, but not the 2.91 acres that used to house the Finney Building and other things for DPW, and that was to be put into recreation. So at the CPC meeting Thursday night, the planning board designee referenced the fact that the community's been waiting a decade for this. By the time that project is done, you're pushing 19 or 20 years. This is going to be a phenomenal investment in downtown Plymouth. And I hopefully, maybe Madam Chair in the next, well, at least the town manager can maybe keep us up to date on how that is proceeding. The sooner that goes out to bid, the better. When we go down the Hedges Pond, Barry de Blasio, department head, had brought a recommendation forward to town meeting. It was for a, what do we call it? A pavilion, a three-season pavilion for roughly $350,000. He did that because the Plymouth Select Board had a long-term goal of a full-day camp down there, summer camp down at Hedges, and he had done that. So that created a little bit of controversy and some consternation among individuals. And I had no problem taking a step back, even though it was a wonderful proposal, that it was fiscally conservative, was going to provide the community with what we needed down there to go to the next level. But taking a step back, I don't have a problem with. And obviously the key at Hedges is the Great Hall. So if CPC wants to take some admin funds and invest it into a, study of that structure, see what it'll take it to bring it up to, 2023 standards and what it can do for us long term, I don't have a problem with that. But we've already been told by numerous department heads that the four cottages out back present absolutely no use to the community, and they're unsafe, and they're down there compromising public safety. So I'm with Mr. Bletzer. The sooner we can get town staff down there to remove those, the better. Let's focus on the Great Hall. Get the report done, bring in the stakeholders, have an open and public discussion. And I think part of the key here is Bill and Derek, is that prior to the summit, obviously we all know, I think Mr. Hellman, Mr. Bletzer attended the CPC summit, which was at this point in time a couple months ago. The last meeting we had before we went into the summit, the CPC, we all agreed that before we left the room that night, the chair of the CPC and the town manager were going to agree to a date, time, and location for the summit part 2. That needs to happen. We had a CPC member inquired Thursday night about potentially hiring part-time help. Bill, I know you have concerns about minimal access to town hall. I think there's other things. We have to have a conversation about legal representation. I have an issue with article structuring with respect to financing. There's a whole litany of issues here. Good communication is not only speaking, but it's listening. So I have multiple colleagues from the CPC sat there and listened at the first summit. They took in everything that the department head said, and they wanted time to analyze that. And then they wanted to come back at the second part of the summit and articulate their positions with respect to, we can support A, B, and C, but we disagree with D, E, and F. And let's improve upon this process and move forward as a bigger, better Plymouth CPC. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Well, I have something to say. Obviously, you all know how I feel about Hedges Pond and the Great Hall, and I'm still committed to that. I do know that I believe our fire chief did say that those 4 buildings out back are a safety hazard. So that's an issue. But Hedges Pond, Great Hall, you know what? You want a pavilion, build it, but do not take that Great Hall down. And so that's been my position all along. The fisherman's shanty, as adorable as they may be, once they're fixed up, just turn your head and look at that outrageous, hideous Burt's. That's what we need to do something with. Get rid of it, buy it, take it down, whatever you got to do with it. But I'm wondering if CPC could get involved in that. Or have we done anything to reach out to the owners and say, you know, we're going to buy it. We're going to take it by eminent domain. I don't care what we do with it, but we've been talking about it. I know for the entire 6 years I've been on the board, we've had issues with what it looks like, and I'm sure it's probably getting hammered tonight. So, you know, the fisherman shacks, you know, I can't, I guess my vision, I can't see it as something adorable to take a look at, because when you turn around, you look at Burt's and it's hideous. So, and then the comfort station I mean, you know, it seems like all of our projects are taking like a decade, and not even, there's no shovel in the ground as of yet. And, you know, it's great to have communication, but it's even better to actually do something after it's communicated. So, and that's all I have to say about those 3 things. Is there anyone else?
I can, Betty, I can reassure you and others that the Community Preservation Committee has reached out to the owners of that property at Burt's to let them know that there's a Community Preservation Act in Plymouth, and we would be more than happy to talk to them. We see it as an opportunity as acquiring the site and taking the building down so that we had greater access to Plymouth Beach to manage it after storms and during storms, and having it as a scenic overlook and a vista where people can go that have mobility issues and not have to make it out to the beach and sit and enjoy it from that location. But we know that it's going to be problematic, that the expected sea level rises that we're seeing along our coast are going to require us to address this. We've done it in the past. The CPC was active in negotiating with some landowners at Whitehorse Beach to acquire their cottages so that the town would have greater access to Whitehorse Beach to manage those resources after storms. So we do see opportunities along our coast where we can kind of embrace that rationale. So rest assured, as we start to move forward this spring and doing our community outreach to gauge different people on our application process, we will be continuing to reach out to people in Plymouth that have resources like that, let them know that the town is very interested in talking to them about their property and how it could be a benefit to the town. So we will continue working on that end.
I would think that the town would be doing the reaching out. Am I mistaken? I
No,
mean, is
every
that
year
something,
The
is
community
that something we
preservation-
should be doing, Derek, as well?
As it relates to Bert's, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different approaches with Bert's, certainly, we've talked about in the past in this forum, just having direct lines of communication with the owner to see if, where their heads are at, what their redevelopment plans are, if they have any. If all else fails, I can tell you, though, I'm working with Nick Mayo, our Commissioner of Buildings, to draft a nuisance bylaw. This nuisance bylaw, we hope would go to the October town meeting and would give us the regulatory authority to manage these types of properties in our community. I think we mentioned not only Bert's, but we've also talked about the old Full Sail as well as problem properties that have sat there that are highly noticed, but have gone really uncared for many, many years. So that's kind of our two-prong approach at this time with those properties.
We, just to make a clarification, the Community Preservation Committee has jurisdiction over the Mass General Law that calls for an application to be created and released to the public. In releasing this application to the public, we do outreach. We notify different people in the community that there's a community preservation application available. It's meant for these purposes. And sometimes we reach out directly to property owners in Plymouth where their property is in an area of Plymouth that is of great interest to us. So we just want to make sure that they know that there's an application process, but it's on, you have to have a willing and able buyer to move forward in any discussion. And I know that the town over the years, different departments have reached out, but in our responsibility, we try to reach out just to let people know that there's an application process and you can pull an application and bring it to the CPC. So I think that's how we've worked with the town over the last 21 years in a partnership. So I hope to continue that.
All right. So, Ms. Davis, did you have something to say?
Well, I think what Town Manager Derek Brindisi has suggested about, was it a bylaw you were talking about?
Yes.
Nuisance bylaw.
Yeah, is just a wonderful thing because I couldn't agree more. I hear it from so many people that Bert's is such an eyesore. It's dangerous and it really should go. And because it's in a place that gets getting battered by storms, it shouldn't be replaced. It should become part of the town. And then the other thing I just want to say, I was and have been part of the Stevensfield Planning and Design Committee for the last, started in 2013, 10 years. So we are very excited about it going out to bid, but also we have been very buffeted by the town because we had plans and then they'd be changed. The first ones we understand why they would change because of the rising water. And so the plans had to be changed. So I think our very last meeting we had with a lot of the town there, we just kind of said, okay, we just really want this to go forward. And so we agreed. And as Bill has pointed out, as part of what went to town meeting was the little building from 1917, the only remaining part from 1917 to be restored. And that's gone. So I guess I'm just hoping. And as Mrs. Cavaco said, it takes us a long time to get things going. And I hope those bids will go out. It will make a lot of people happy. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Well, am I seeing someone else?
Thank you, Irene Caldwell and Mr. Brindisi.
Okay. I wanted to thank you for the meeting tonight. It was very nice to be a part of the whole thing. And I wish you good luck, Betty.
Thank you.
For you tonight. Made us all proud.
Thank you. I appreciate your kindness. Mr. Brindisi.
Yeah, I'm going to take a quick 2 minutes because I don't know if we'll have this conversation again publicly regarding these structures that Mr. Cohen has pointed out. But I wanted to just give a little bit more background on some of these items. So the Hedges Pond cabins and the Great Hall, through the efforts of David Gould and Barry de Blasio, have tested those for asbestos and lead. And we're still waiting for the final LSP report to come in. But what I can tell you right now, what we know for certainty is that the 4 cabins have tested positive for lead. And so many of you know that lead is it was used in most of the paints prior to 1972. And so it's not uncommon to see lead in paint. What's uncommon in this situation is that sometimes the lead can be friable and then you can remediate it. But this lead in this paint, and this is the first time we've seen this, is actually leaching from the buildings. And the LSP believes it's leaching into the soil. And because of the way the lead is leaching off of the building, the LSP is suggesting that the only thing we can do is to take this to a hazardous waste site. And not even a hazardous waste site here in Massachusetts. From what I've been informed of by Mr. Gould, the closest hazardous waste site is in New Hampshire. So I bring this up because I know the fire chief and the building inspector both have said that these buildings pose a significant public safety hazard. But now what we've come to learn is they pose a very significant risk to our public health. And so for those reasons, based upon what I'm hearing from the board this evening, we really don't think we have any alternative but to tear those cabins down. We still, my light went off. Hold on a second. So it happens, you don't move. So we still haven't received the report for the Great Hall. And when we have that report, we'll be happy to share that back with the board and with CPC. So that's still an unknown. The other unknown is Mr. Blitzer referenced that there was one cabin that was relocated closest to the beach and is being used. That building hasn't been tested. And that's something we talked about this morning at our staff meeting, that given the significant findings of these 4 cabins and waiting for the findings of the Great Hall, we may have to go test this other 5th cabin as well. So I bring this up because, I don't want folks to feel in the community that we're just, arbitrarily tearing buildings down. But we have concerns. And quite frankly, I don't see a way around the lead concerns that have been brought to our attention at those 4 cabins. So again, I want this to be said publicly because folks may see these buildings getting torn down. I expect they do get torn down, and I wanted people to understand why. And then the last item I'll talk about is the comfort station at Stevens Field. And the only thing I can say is what was brought to my attention today is that the Historic Commission did not impose a demolition delay. And the reason why they didn't impose a demolition delay is that they don't believe that this structure was historically significant. So for those reasons alone, and for cost saving measures to put those dollars back into the renovation of Stevens Field, it was the recommendation by town staff to remove the comfort station at Stevens Field. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Next,
Eddie?
Mr. Mahoney.
Just a quick thank you, just a quick follow-up to the town manager. All right, Derek, so you're still waiting on a report for the Great Hall at Hedges.
Right.
So now you're telling us that it's distinctly possible that lead paint over there could also be leaching into the ground.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Now on to the next order of business is the Shishigahama exchange trip discussion. So our last meeting, we decided that we would speak amongst ourselves. I know that Anthony received an email and forwarded to me regarding the trip. And there were a couple things that I found problematic. One of the biggest things. So I just want to tell you, so after the last meeting, when we were talking about this trip, and I've been thinking about it quite a bit, and I understand that there's going to be fundraising and all that stuff, but honestly, there's $76,000 in that account. And I want that account to be able to pay for our children to go. Not for, I don't have a problem with them raising money, but I don't ever want them to get into a situation that if they can't raise enough money to send themselves, I don't want them to not be able to go. So the money does come from distinguished visitors, and I don't know what our jurisdiction is over that money, if any, but my suggestion is that we also pay for the children and not just our school committee members and administration and all that. And we have decided who will be attending Shishigahama, and that will be Mr. Quintal. So I know that, I believe that Andy Loritz and Kim Savory are here, I believe. So, and I think Mr. Loritz has his hand up, correct?
That is correct. One moment.
Hi, folks. I don't know. Hi. My first time doing a Zoom select board meeting, so I didn't know if you could hear me. I'm Andy Loretz. I am currently the chair of the Distinguished Visitors Committee. And so I would just like to address those points. So our first one is Chairman Cavaco. I do love and appreciate that the sentiment to pay for the students, and especially the idea that students shouldn't be prohibited because of costs or whatever else from attending the trip. I do really feel that as a public school teacher. I hate it when students cannot participate, for instance, in music because of the cost of instruments and things like that. And I do try to seek every way, shape, and form to make things accessible for all students, whether that's through my own job or through a program like this. I just kind of want to give an explanation about the account and why it is at such a high amount. Normally, our balance runs around kind of a higher number to begin with, kind of usually in the 40,000s to 50,000s. It's slightly higher now in the 76 range, 76,000 range, due to the fact that during the pandemic, none of the exchanges were actually occurring. So the number does seem very high, and that is a result of the pandemic, essentially, kind of taking a lot of no use for the funds to be drawn at that time, because we weren't hosting and we weren't sending student delegations. So that's the main reason why that account is so high. As you know, this is a sending year, but next year will be a hosting year. And so part of the expenses that we're going to incur this year have to do with the fact that obviously we have to pay for flights. We were only able to secure flights at this moment in time because of changes in travel arrangements in Japan itself with their domestic flights. They no longer offer domestic flight from Tokyo to Sendai, which is the closest town, or rather major city, to Shichigahama. So that's going to incur another extra cost. Our committee did both at this previous meeting about a week ago and about a month ago at that meeting, we did, as a committee, decide that we would help students who did approach us about this with the offer of limited financial aid. Prior to students actually signing up for this trip, we did make them aware of the fact that the trip could be running as high as $3,500 for their individual costs, which we know is a little on the high side, but mostly out of our control. It's mostly due to timing, due to all flights being a little bit more expensive, but especially international ones to halfway across the world. And then with the added cost of not having those domestic flights within Japan itself. So parents and students and families were made aware if they received an interview. Unfortunately, like you're mentioning, we did have a couple of students who, when I emailed them saying, okay, if you'd like to interview, just so you know that the cost is going to be what it is, those students did decide that, you know, this might not be the right time for them to try doing that. With that in mind, I wish that we had kind of had this conversation prior to sending, you know, to all this work, because then we could have had those students kind of maybe reconsider this. Those families did have a family orientation meeting last night as well. We did go over the costs. We talked to them about the fact that the flights right now are at $3,155. And again, that does not necessarily include the additional leg of the trip going from Tokyo to Shichigahama, and that they could be responsible for an additional cost. It is my intention to put on the agenda for the DVC's next meeting that we will cover the cost of that next leg of the trip using those funds. So to the point that was being made, we are, as a DVC, trying to offer a reduction in the cost as much as we can. I want to point out that those families did already agree to pay that amount last night. They did sign contracts. They were fully aware. I did leave time for families to speak with us about anything, especially in regards to cost. And we weren't made aware of anything at that time. And families, like you said, Chairman Cavaco, do understand that fundraising is a part of it. I do want to kind of speak to the value of the fundraising process. This is the way that the students of that delegation become a delegation in and of itself. That's how they become a cohesive unit, how they get to know each other prior to going to the trip. I think if you talk to previous student delegations, they'll let you know that was kind of a meaningful, community service oriented, impactful experience that I think is a valuable experience for the students to participate in, especially since this is an opportunity that not every student is getting to have. So I think we might want to take that into account as well. I also
I don't have any. Trust me, I know all about fundraising and what it does, and I'm lucky enough to be involved in an organization now that is all we do is fundraise for cadets. So that is not a problem, and I don't know how to explain it to you. I don't want you to think that, I don't appreciate what you guys do. I think it's a great program. I just don't think it's fair that the people that work get all their trip paid for and the students don't. And like I said, that's what bothers me. It's not that I have no problem paying for you guys to go, none at all. Mm-hmm. But I think we should do more for the kids. And that's been my thing forever. So
yeah, and that's a fair point. To be clear, I'm not going this time around. When I did go in 2019, that was a lot. It was a lot of work, and I think the reason why the adult delegation side of the delegation, they are there to, yes, to have, a trip to Shichigahama, but also it is a lot of work and representing the town in its official capacity, especially for the teacher chaperones. I will say that is why their expenses are being covered. So I do understand the equity piece of it that you're talking about.
I would just like it more equal. You know what I mean? So, and if it's something that we have to, try to get more money, whether it's from another organization or what happens if you don't make enough money fundraising and all that stuff. I just think that, I just like more done for the kids. That's all. And like I said, nothing about paying for you guys to go. I have no problem doing it. I would never take 10 kids over to Shishigahama, I'll tell you that. But like I said, I just think if there's something more that we can do for them, so they're not like under the gun for fundraising, and I will offer any help I can to help fundraise. But I think that, parents we pay a lot of money in taxes, and parents, I mean, what does it take to educate a kid now? Like $14,000, $15,000, $17,000. So that's all I'm saying is I'd like to see more equity for the children. That's, and like I said, without anything about who goes, who's paying for, I have no problem paying for the administration, the teachers, none at all.
Yeah. If I may, just to that point.
If I might step in here.
Sure.
Andy, would you please go over the financial ramifications?
Yeah, I was just about to do that.
Please do that. I think you've buried the lead here. So please update everybody on the suggestion and the costs involved of fully covering all of the students and what that will do to the monies in reserve for this committee. Thank you.
Yep, I was just about to do that. Thank you, Harry.
And we already know that, but that's okay.
So the costs, they are pretty exorbitant. I will go over that. Let me just pull that up. So like we said, our starting account balance is at 76,000. We do need to pay for the flights, which in and of itself, our account needs to be able to cover essentially. And so the flights themselves are $50,000. So what that's going to bring our account down to is $26,000. After that, we need to get the bus, which is another $5,000 roughly. So then we're down to 21. Then after that, we also need to get travel insurance. We don't have an accurate quote yet because that's contingent upon the passport information and all of that stuff being provided. My basic idea was that would be around $5,000. I'm not exactly clear on that number, but that would bring us to around $16,000. I was going over the account information. The official gift is another, historically been anywhere between 400, but up to as much as like 1,500. So that's another, I put in my ledger at like 1,200 to kind of break even there. So then we're down to 15,000. And then other small expenses like t-shirts and stuff really bringing us down to 14,000 when all is said and done. So that's what our account needs to be able to do. If we were to pay for all of that, we would then no longer have substantial enough money for when they come to us next summer. Just given the amount that we typically spend, which is usually in that ballpark range. It would be that sort of thing where we might be very close, but our account would not cover that. So in terms of the numbers, at this time, while I appreciate the idea of the equity, I don't think it would work out numbers wise for this year. If it's something that the board wanted to decide about going forward, that might be more doable if we wanted to talk about things like increasing, and what you were talking about, increasing, ways that our board committee could get more funds. So I don't know if that helps clarify, but.
Well, like I said, I mean, I figured it would be down, to around the $10,000 mark. And obviously they'll be coming here next year, but I mean, there are other financial engines that, I mean, even if you had to put an article to town meeting or something, I just, like I said, I just don't think it's right. But that's my own opinion, and it has nothing to do with, whether who's going or not going or whatever. I just think that it just doesn't sit well with me. That's all. Because I think that, our concentration has always been on the kids, and it should stay on the kids. And like I said, not that I have any issue with you guys, of any of the teachers or the administration going. I just think that, if it's something that, and maybe it's not going to be this year, I won't be here next year, but maybe something that we can move forward with a plan that says, whether it's an article or something for town meeting, something. I just don't, that's a big burden for families, and I understand that they know how much it's going to cost, but obviously you had a couple kids drop out because of the cost, and I think that's terrible.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I agree. Yeah.
But I guess enough with that. And I know, Kim, you have your hand up, so.
No, I just wanted to add a couple of things to Andy's comments. One, and Mr. Quintal might remember, the DVC used to contribute some money towards the children, whether it was $500 a piece or $200 a piece. The select board and the DVC stopped that, maybe because I've been on this committee for 12 years or 11 years. They stopped that probably 5 or 6 years ago, just that we didn't have the money to do that. So I just want to say that with that's an option too, right? We could contribute some to the kids. Like Andy said, the bus, we have to take a charter bus from Tokyo to Shichigahama because there is no more flight. And other than that, we'd have to take a public bus. And we figure for all of us to travel together, and it would take us all the way to Shichigahama versus just to Sendai, and then we'd have to get another ride. The other thing too is just to remember, all the adults are we're working the whole time. I've gone before, Mr. Quintal's gone before, Mr. Mahoney's gone before. It's not a vacation by any stretch of the imagination. And that's why we actually, the DVC and Shichigahama, we don't really allow spouses anymore because of that. We are working the whole time, and it's an extra burden for us to bring a companion person to go with us, because we are working. We're going to meetings, we're giving speeches, we're talking to different community members, and it's long days. So I just want to give you that background, because I agree with you. My daughter went several years ago. It was around the same price. We made it work. And I do believe that if these two students that weren't able to go, if they had said, will we still want to go, and we'll help it out, I'm pretty sure the school committee has a policy that any student that can't afford a trip, we make it work. So I'm sure we would have gone that route as well if they hadn't so easily said. Then the other thing is too, if we do this in full, we're going to be expected to do it every year that they go. And there's so many kids behind us that we didn't do it for. And yeah, we have $76,000, but on an average year, we have 15,000. So I just think about all of the ramifications of it. And I'm sure Andy was going to get to that, but I just wanted to add all that. But like I said, in the past, we did contribute some money towards it, but not the whole thing.
Well, I think that maybe that's something, like I said, moving forward, that we should be doing, whether it's the distinguished visitors or whatever, whichever
Also,
committee.
We also have other obligations other than Shichigahama. So we have somebody coming before the board next meeting to give us a proposal of something that they want funded. There could be any other opportunity. So I wouldn't want to drain that account completely. I think that if somebody else were to come that's a distinguished visitor that isn't from Japan, that would fall into the realm as well. We've discussed this in depth because we we agree with you, but
Harry?
So Andy, if we fund in full, we end up with about $15,000 in our account. Okay. In July, we're going to receive another currently 10,000 because the Visitor Service Board is not contributing their 5,000. They may change their minds, but currently we can count on basically after July having, let's say, $25,000. How much is next year's trip from our friends from Shishigahama going to cost our group?
Yeah, so I ran the numbers for the past 3 times that we hosted in 2018, 2016, 2014. Each of those times was between 9,000 and about let me just look at this number. And about 16,000. So that would basically take up the entire account that would be remaining, even with everything else that got added.
So if we're going to extrapolate, given the expense of everything, let's say that we forget the average and just go with, with some scrimping and stuff, next year, 16,000. We're going to end up, after our friends from Shishigahama come here, if that we had $10,000, but in that following July, let's say Visitor Service Board does come back on, we are at 25,000. Okay. And you're saying that a fully funded students and everybody else costs $50,000. When would you anticipate the next trip to Shishigahama be? When will our friends from Shishigahama ask us to come again?
So that following summer, right? So that would be 2025.
Okay,
so we would not have enough
money
funds to do that, basically.
We would have enough money to do what we normally do, but not enough money to continue the precedent that we would be setting this year. Correct. By fully funding.
Correct, yeah.
So,
which would leave us, in an interesting position, because then we would be subsidizing some of the students for this year, and then it would be hard to explain to the parents for the 2025 delegation why we couldn't do that again.
But here's the whole thing. Put it in the budget. I mean, it's $50,000. That's like $1.25 per taxpayer. I mean, put it in a line item budget for the school department. I just, like I said, I mean, I just think it should be more inclusive. And if one's going to get paid for, and then everybody's going to get paid for, that's all. I mean, and like I said, maybe that's not something that anybody's interested in doing, but I don't know. It's like I said, it doesn't feel right to me. That's all. And I mean, and I'm serious. It has nothing to do with people going and getting, I have no problem with that. It just doesn't feel right that, we're making the kids come up with the money. Mr. Helm.
I think that the committee, of which I'm the liaison, agrees with you on this concept. We definitely do. The problem that we have with fully funding the trip, okay, and that doesn't mean I don't believe the committee shouldn't discuss partially funding these travelers at our next meeting. But if we fully fund them now, number one, we create a precedent of fully funding going forward, which is fine, but it's a precedent. We can't go back on that. And then if we don't come up with other funding mechanisms, we've already set the precedent for fully paying. But say for whatever reason, we don't get some sort of thing in the budgets. Okay, we don't, we don't get funds. We've already committed precedent wise to fully funding the trips, but we won't have the money to do it. And that's what concerns me. So Betty, I think that the entire group totally understands and totally agrees with you in concept. I think that in my mind, the best course of action is for us to figure out an equitable amount that won't deplete our resources to the point that we won't be able to really do what we need to do in 2 years unless we actually figure out another funding source. That's, and then work in those next 2 years to create that funding source that will make it, viable long-term to offer full funding to all travelers. How does that sound to you, Betty?
I mean, like I said, Harry, I'll be gone in May. Not saying that I won't be back someday, but
oh yeah, okay, Betty.
you know what I mean? I just, like I said, I think it's important that we focus on that, because like I said, I just
Betty, I don't think we're disagreeing with you.
I understand that. I just, like I said, I just like to,
yeah, no, I know.
Let's, even if I'm out of office and we need to work on something, I'm happy to do that.
Well, and I think, certainly your fundraising, your abilities there. But in much the same way, this is in a way like the outdoor dining. We have to figure out, what are we going to incorporate full funding? And then work out the mechanisms to incorporate that. It's just that, so I think we understand and I think we agree about the concept. We would love to be able to do that. We would love no family to not be able to send one of their kids because of expenses. It's just that right now it looks like we have a lot of money, but we've got a lot of money that's going to be going out in the next 3 years.
Yeah, no, and like I said, I understand that. And maybe, you never know, maybe there'll be a town meeting member that puts in a citizen's petition to give money to the school department to be able to fund this program, because it's an important program.
No, that would be great, but that citizen petition won't occur until October.
Right. No, I understand. Yes,
And then,
I'm saying moving forward.
Okay. Yeah. No, we have to explore what would be the proper mechanisms to create a situation where all travelers were fully funded. Okay.
And I know Matt's been patiently waiting with his little orange hand up, so I'm sorry, Matt.
No, that's okay. I just think that I agree with everything that literally everyone's been saying tonight, from the chair all the way down through our committee. I think the only other piece that I just wanted to kind of add, and I think adding something to town meeting would be fascinating, and to see that go forward. But I also think that the other piece that we need to add to this is that we also, from the last DVC meeting, spoke about the relationships that we do have that we haven't even fully explored to their potential, that we should be probably exploring as well, besides Shikigahama. We did have a number of students, and I only knew about it, come from Plymouth, England, to perform at Plymouth North High School. And I only kind of knew about that because my son happened to be performing on the Plymouth North. But those are the relationships between there and Holland. And I'm sure Andy or Kim or Harry could talk more about other relationships, but we need to keep that in mind too, because if we do receive a request or notification that someone's coming over from one of these other sister cities that maybe we're not as active with, we're kind of on the hook for that as well. So it is a big piece. The funding is a huge piece. I think we would love to fund everybody to be able to go for students and the town administration that's going and everything. But we do have unfortunately, these responsibilities of being a good host when they do come over here, and that's kind of the foresight that we unfortunately have to go down. I think at this time, I do think that it's a little bit of a hiccup that, you know, the fundraising season, if you will, for these students was shortened, which is hard. So I look forward to the next meeting where we do discuss maybe possibly funding that last leg of the trip. But that's for the next meeting. I can't discuss that here, I guess. So, but thank you.
And we should be funding all the stuff that we do because it's an outreach, and it's like, you know, I mean, we're the town of Plymouth. We're like the biggest town in the state. I mean, I think we shouldn't be following anyone. We should be leading. So, and like I said, I'll get off my soapbox now, but I just like, I think there's some serious discussion that needs to take place because, I mean, I hate to say it, even $100,000 is not a big burden on a taxpayer. It's like $2. So that's just my opinion. But all right. So now,
Can I just
ahead.
clarify one thing? I'm sorry. I had my hand up again. You probably thought it was from before.
I did.
When you had said give the money to the school department, just because we're going into town meeting about on our budget, I just want to clarify it's not going to the school department. This trip is open to any student in that age in Plymouth, whether they go to a private school, whether they go to Rising Tide. So I just want to clarify that we're not giving any money to the school department.
Well, meaning the schools.
No, I know, but that's
or-
how it was
yeah.
worded. So I just want to, just
See,
trying to,
or
clarify.
the-
You can
I don't
understand
care.
why I'm doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand why you're doing that. Whoever you call it that's holding the
The
purse
DVC,
strings.
the DVC.
Okay.
Yeah.
Give it to them.
Yeah. Thank
So,
you.
okay. All right. Now that we've beaten that to death. And I think that's it, unless you guys have any questions for us.
No, I just wanted to say thank you for, letting me try and explain something, probably poorly, but trying to explain something. And I appreciate
and
the
I do
sentiment.
understand. Yeah, I do. I understand. I just, like I said, it is what it is.
Yeah, thank
All
you.
right, I appreciate it, Amy. Thank you. Okay, town manager's report.
All right. Good evening, everybody. So I want to start this evening by just bringing the board. I know Brad Brothers did a great job last week working with other town officials on keeping the board and the community apprised of what was going on Water Street. But just this is our first meeting together. So as you all should know by now, the contractor brought in, and our engineering firm, Environmental Partners, brought in another consultant to do what is known as ground penetrating radar. And this was conducted last Friday morning around the Water Street area in the construction zone. This has to do with the water interceptor project. And what the GPI was looking for, it was looking for any depressions in the ground, was looking for any potential sinkholes that could have been created from water movement in the soil. And we were happy to find that the GPI found no potential depressions in the area that we found a number of cracked foundations. So because we didn't find any potential sinkholes, we all felt comfortable with using the resident engineer's recommendation to let the businesses and the residents in that area know that they can return safely back to their buildings. And that was accomplished on Friday afternoon. Today, we continue to work with our DPW director, Northern Construction, and EP engineers to continue to look for potential future concerns. So there'll be some soil testing and some bores dug so that we can get a better sense of if any of the soil in the area was further disturbed. The GPI goes down approximately 12 feet. So we continue to monitor the situation. We are putting plans in place to maybe change some of our means and methods of construction to prevent anything like this from happening in the future. but the construction has restarted, and we hope to continue without any further hiccups and meet the June 1st deadline. So again, if anything comes up, we certainly will keep the community and the board apprised in the future. Moving on, this board has talked a little bit in the past about, I know Selectman Maloney has talked about it, the town re-engaging the Department of Conservation at the state level to have conversations around the state pier. Both David Gould and myself and our harbor master will be meeting with the state delegation on Thursday, and former Senate President Therese Murray to have this conversation first and foremost. And then Mr. Gould has set up a meeting on Friday for just town officials and state officials to sit down and to have those early conversations. So I wanted the board to know that we'll keep you up to date as to those conversations, and hoping to get some of our state delegation to help assist us with maybe having those conversations with the governor and or the lieutenant governor. Moving on, I've talked about the online permitting system that is now up and running and is live. Started a few weeks ago. We've already processed over 300 permits just in the online system, and we expect that to increase exponentially in the future months. Staying on construction, Station 2 continues to stay on time and on budget. We are projecting to cut a ribbon hopefully in November sometime if things continue to go well. Station 5, the bid went out this past week. We expect to open bids sometime in mid-April for the bid opening. We'll keep you posted on that project. As you know, the police department has had a clinical social worker working with our route cars during the day patrol during the past year. Chief Flynn reported today that as of last week, we have a second clinical social worker who will be working the night shift from 4 to 12 Monday through Friday. Again, so this way now we have 16 hours of coverage Monday through Friday to help our police officers with any types of calls. Most of these calls are behavioral or mental health related. So that program has proved its worth in its first year and continues to grow. It's starting on Monday. We expect the DPW to be over at the Plymouth Rod and Gun Club. As you know, we signed the MOA with the Rod and Gun Club a few months back. This will allow the police department and other local law enforcement departments to have its own gun range at the Rod and Gun Club. Our DPW forces will construct the gun range at the Rod and Gun Club. Once that's complete, again, our PD will have its own range that it can use as it needs. And then you all had seen the kiosk we had piloted over at the main entrance here at Town Hall. We've added a second kiosk over at the atrium area. So these two kiosks are now fully operational and provide very, I think, detailed directions and instructions to individuals who visit here at Town Hall and they're looking for a very specific service. They can go to this kiosk, they can hit a button, and it'll tell them exactly what service they need and what office to go to and what floor to go to. So again, now we have the two kiosks that are fully operational. And then last I want to report, I think you all know that the senior task force has been working very closely with Michelle Brady, our director at the Cal, on becoming age and dementia certified. They've had a recent meeting. As they move down this continuum, they will be issuing a survey to the 55 plus population in the next few weeks. So I wanted the board to be aware of that. In case you're in that age range, you actually may get a survey to fill out and return back to the Cal. Pending any questions, that's all I have for this evening. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for the town manager? Okay, thank you, Derek. The next is select board open discussion. New business, letters, old business. Anyone? Okay, and next is a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
We have a second. I'll second. All those in favor? All All right. Good night, everybody. We'll see you in
Good
a
night.
couple weeks.
Hey, everybody.